Welcome, everyone, and welcome to this important call today. I just want to make a quick announcement that si necesita traducción, este seminario tiene traducción en español en vivo. Haga clic en el globo para activarlo. Please take down the slides. Again, welcome everyone to this important call, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Richard Morales, but please call me Rich. I'm an attorney, organizer, and political strategist with nearly 15 years of experience organizing faith, immigrant, and Latino communities. I have led political and issue campaigns, advocacy, and grassroots lobbying in Washington, D.C., and created programs where immigrant families can stay together, free from the threat of deportation. The project you will hear about today is the most important of my career. I know my work over the last decade has changed the lives of many individuals. However, over the last 2 years, I have questioned whether my work is truly having a transformational impact for the long term. I have also questioned whether I have participated in othering of people who do not align with my political views. Last year, I read John Powell's book, Racing to Justice. In the book, he said, and I am paraphrasing, that othering is not about liking or disliking someone. It is based on the conscious or unconscious assumption that a certain identified group poses a threat to the favored group. It is largely driven by politicians and the media as opposed to personal contact. Overwhelmingly, people don't know those that they are othering. I want to repeat, othering happens because of an outside narrative about a group and the lack of relationship. I no longer question if I have ever been part of othering. I know I have participated in othering, not just in my work, but even in my own family. I made a conscious decision to disassociate myself from family members with different political views. But the truth is, I really don't understand how they view the world. I don't understand why they have made the choices they have made and the impact that the economy, the pandemic, and climate change has had on their lives. Pundits, the media, and academics have a lot to say about Latinos and Latino evangelicals. They read polling and make assumptions about with a broad brush to paint my community as extreme across the political spectrum and are developing a narrative that is othering and splitting us apart. I don't believe we will build power or create change that impacts lives by only talking with people who agree. As organizers, the power is moving beyond polling and othering and actually talking with each other. Taking the time to have deep conversations with empathy and understanding to bridge gaps across differences in our community. This project, a partnership between the National Latino Evangelical Coalition, Brandeis University, and UNDIVIDED, is about generating information, creating the space to understand those with different political views, and fostering the empathy I believe is missing in our organizing. Eventually, this project will provide the tools organizers, clergy, and others need to gain clear understanding of Latinos and Latino evangelicals and the political views shaping their opinion as citizens or even recent migrants. If our goal is truly to create impactful change that includes all persons and lasts beyond our lifetime, we will need new tools and tactics. I believe this project will be one of the many tools to achieve it. Today, you will be briefed on a quantitative study by Latino evangelicals in Florida and some of its surprising results. I want to note that this is a pilot, but we are so excited about the findings that we felt it necessary to get the information out into the ecosystem. As we expand the research, we will continue to update you all. After our speakers from Brandeis University, NaLEC, and UNDIVIDED share the results, you will hear from two guests who will react and share their thoughts on how they see opportunity. Can we put up slide 3, please? Due to our short time, I will introduce all the speakers now in order of appearance. So coming up first is Dr. Alexandra Pinheiro Shields. She's Associate Professor of Practice of Racial Equity at Brandeis University. Reverend Dr. Gabriel Salguero, pastor of the Gathering Place and Assemblies of God congregation in Orlando and president of the National Latino Evangelical Coalition. Troy Jackson, executive director of UNDIVIDED. Suma Arias, executive director of People's Action Institute. And Reverend Dr. Walter Kim, president of the National Association of Evangelicals. Before turning it over to Alexandra, I want to thank Gabriel and Janet Salguero for opening their congregation for the pilot and their incredible team of Gia Valdez, Rosa Rodriguez, Jennifer Velasquez, Manny Rivera, and Yarelis Rivera. The persons I named led the interviews and helped analyze the results you will hear today. None are academic researchers. Lastly, I want to thank Sylvia Stewart, a senior researcher at Brandeis University, for so much of the work of this project, from training the co-researchers to developing the protocol, writing reports, and acting as a thinking partner with me and others. This could not have happened without Sylvia. Go ahead, Alexandra, take it away, please.
Thank you so much, Rich. And I would like to first start off by thanking you, Rich, for sharing your experience with us and also your vision. It was very inspiring to hear your words. Thank you. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. I'm very excited to share our research with you. I love this project because we are using a participatory action research paradigm, a community-driven participatory action research paradigm. Participatory action research, or PAR, as it is often referred to, was developed in the 1970s in South America by a Colombian sociologist of the name Orlando Falsborda and the farmers he worked with as they organized for agrarian reform. He named their approach Investigación Acción Participativa. PAR seeks to shift the power to construct knowledge and thereby societal narratives from elite academics to communities struggling for justice. It is, therefore, an anti-racist Latino research paradigm. In this particular research project, 5 Latino evangelical members of the gathering in Orlando worked as co-researchers to interview and survey 27 respondents, as well as analyze data, develop research findings. We also conducted a focus group with 11 pastors from Central Florida. And now I'd like to share with you the findings. For respondents, Christianity operated both as a statement of values, behaviors, and beliefs, and also as an identity. When asking questions of evangelicals about faith and politics, it's important to be precise. For example, asking if the government should act to keep the U.S. Christian can mean very different things to different people. We learned that the context is very important. As I said, we spoke to 27 attendees of Latino evangelical churches, and they presented 27 unique worldviews. While some trends did emerge within our sample, there was an immense diversity of opinions about politics, social issues, and the role of faith in society. We gave the respondents this survey created by the PRRI because it is a validated instrument, and we wanted to be able to compare our sample to the general sample in the nation. And as you can see, folks that were part of our research are spread across the gamut here in these particular questions. And so we can confidently say that the people that we spoke to represent a wide range of opinions. Next. So almost every respondent noted confusion and a lack of knowledge when we asked them directly about Christian nationalism. No one could define it. We asked them to define it. Nobody could define it. So this indicates that there is an opportunity here to engage congregations about the relationship between faith and American identity. When asked the role that the broader church is called to play in society, people highlighted the church's role in healing, in connecting, and uniting the community. These interviewees generally noted that the broader church had major work to meet these goals, so that there's a lot to be done. but that should be the goal of the church. Another interesting thing that emerged was that direct evangelism was rarely mentioned by our interviewees. Approximately 95% of respondents said that the church was called to play a role in government. Answers highlighting what the role they saw were split into two camps. 55% felt that the church should be a voice for the voiceless and an advocate to meet people's needs. And then 45% felt that the church should be a voice for Christians and a source of leadership and advice for the country's political leaders. Church has increasingly become central to interviewees' engagement with politics and community service. So of the interviewees who were active in their community, serving their community, they did so primarily through their church. Most interviewees said that they want their pastors to speak about political and social beliefs from the pulpit. Interviewees were much more receptive to pastors sharing beliefs about humanitarian issues than partisan issues. Interviewees did not feel like the government pays attention to their needs because they couldn't really see any evidence of it, is what they said to us. The representatives are, and that their representatives, they didn't see any evidence that their representatives are improving their lives or the lives of the people they care about. 75% of respondents gave emphatic no answers to the question of whether they felt like federal and state representatives paid attention to their needs, while another 25% gave mixed answers, like not enough, or if their interests happen to align with ours. Interviewees also noted a feeling that politicians only want to engage with Latino voters when they are up for election. This was a common thread through the conversations, and that they ignore the needs of their communities once they are in power. So our research has quite a bit of findings, a lot more than I am presenting here. These are a few others, but we encourage you to see the full report. The economy and immigration were key uniting policy issues for interviewees, regardless of their political orientation. Interviewees also noted, and this was across the board, all interviews also noted feeling concerned about rising polarization and violence in our country. Value alignment, either biblical or personal, was the most important factor when voters considered candidates in an election. And 73% of respondents believed that the US was founded as a Christian nation or on Christian values, or that the US has a uniquely Christian identity. So again, what I would encourage you all to do is to look at our report and have a fuller sense of what we learned through our participatory action research project. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. So we're going to turn it now over to Reverend Dr. Gabriel Salguero, and he's going to talk a little bit more about the results and how they might apply to the work that he leads. Gabe?
Thank you, Richard, and thank all of you for joining. I want to take this moment to particularly thank Richard, who's helped lead and steward and Sherpa this project, Troy from Undivided, Alexandra and Sylvia from Brandeis, and a special highlight to Gia, Rosa, Jennifer, Manny, and Yarelis, who were the co-investigators or co-research in this investigation. So we're thankful for all of you. And then, of course, our respondents, Sulma from People's Action and Reverend Dr. Walter Kim from the National Association of Evangelicals. As you've heard, my name is Reverend Dr. Gabriel Salguero. I'm the president and founder of the National Latino Evangelical Coalition, NaLEC. And I come to this research with some learnings. Number one is, what does it mean for NaLEC, that is a coalition of several thousand Hispanic evangelical congregations, pastors, and not-for-profits? What are the takeaways? And I want to just put them in three broad categories. Of course, I encourage you to dig deeper at Latino Evangelical Research Project, and you'll see the link at the end of this presentation. Number one, that Latino evangelical churches are a center for convening core Latino evangelicals, and not just for convening, but also they're central for defining democracy, government functionality, to the degree government should or should not be involved in the lives of its citizens, the notions of national identity, how they see or don't see nationalism, patriotism, and of course, how Latino and Latina evangelicals see civic participation. So this is not a small point, that Latino evangelical congregations, much like African-American congregations, historically have been a center for defining and convening civic participation in the life of its participants. And for those of you who are listening, we're talking about 9 to 10 million Latino evangelicals in the United States. 1 out of every 4 children born is Hispanic in the United States, and about 15 to 17% of Latinos in the United States self-define as evangelical. So it's important to know that Latino evangelical congregations are still central to how Latino evangelical citizens understand civic participation, understand notions of national identity, understand notions of what is the government's function, and also how they understand democracy. And that could be, you'll see that manifest in many different ways, because as you'll see from this report, Hispanic or Latina evangelicals are not a monolith, but the centrality of the Latino evangelical church should be underscored, and it's a unique opportunity for partnership, for philanthropic organizations, for research, for civic participation. The second thing I want to highlight is the notion of anomie, disconnection, disenchantment, and invisibility. I put that all in one big category. You'll see that in many of these, the participants, and they're from a broad range of people. You had people in their 30s and people in their 60s, men and women. There's a sense of they're not connected, that the federal and state, local elected officials are not responding to their needs or don't know their need. And so they're disconnected. I put that under the category of invisibility or disconnection or disenchantment. Another unique opportunity, because where do you connect with these men and women? And it's in the church. It's still a central hub, probably more than some of our brothers and sisters in other faith traditions. And so invisibility and disconnection and disenchantment is another, with both federal and state officials. I would underscore that one of the findings is that there's also a sense that the country's not going in the right direction. And so they're looking for, as Alexandra has said, people who are healers and people who are able to define the reality, but also envision a hopeful future. And so that's the second thing. This third thing, and this is very important, it's part of why we did this research, is that proximity brings clarity. Many people have written about Latino evangelicals, to Latino evangelicals, pero estas son las voces de los evangélicos y evangélicas latinos. These are the voices of. And so, as we often say, for us or by us. And proximity brings clarity. Oftentimes in pressers and in top-line research, we talk about Christian nationalism, but we discovered in this report that that's not the language of the base, of the grassroots of Latino evangelicals, although they do feel that Christianity is somehow foundational to their understanding of this nation, which is very interesting in this research. I'm very interested in exploring more deeply what does the Latino evangelical church have to say about Christian nationalism? How is that different than other counterparts in the evangelical movement across the country? And so proximity brings clarity, that these catch-all terms often aligned with evangelicalism writ large are not necessarily true or nuanced when it talks about brown evangelicals in this country. So proximity brings clarity, and the faith organization that's closest to Latino evangelicals is the local church and the networks of local churches that exist for Latino evangelicals. And this is important because I think oftentimes there's a misrepresentation or misunderstanding of the worldviews and convictions that drive Latino evangelicals to civic participation. And part of the reason we did this pilot in Central Florida, large Latino evangelical population, but I think it's really begging us the question of a larger national project: Texas, California, Chicago, North Carolina, DC, Virginia, where there's Salvadorians, and so that I think this is pointing us in a direction that there are certain trajectories, but much more work needs to be done. It's part that NaLEC said yes and is a major partner of this study. If you could go to the next slide, this is important. I had an interview. This is what NaLEC is. It's a national collective Latino evangelical voice connected to serving and empowering the Latino church. Next slide, please. This was part of an interview with a Christian publication called Christianity Today, and then part of another interview, and I put them together for the sake of time. For a long time, the Hispanic Latino church, and I would say the evangelical church, has been invisible to many in the United States. And its growth has not received the necessary attention. I might add, it's also been collapsed into other evangelical organizations. Considering that Latino evangelicals are the fastest growing evangelical group in the United States, that is a problem. And this research seeks to respond in part to that. At the same time, I recognize that we need to face the disenchantment by younger Latinos with a form of evangelicalism that embraces polarization. You will see much research that amongst Latino and Latina millennials and young people, they're looking for healing and unifiers. You'll find that in this research. The reality is that some of that has led to Latina millennials leaving the church and becoming more secularized. And that's actually the fastest growing group amongst Latino millennials, the religiously unaffiliated. And so while one time we're still the center of much of Latino evangelical thought, at the same time, we have to engage civic participation and political engagement in a way that's healing. And so I have much more to say, but I think that those are the top line findings for our coalition as we seek to serve and empower the Latino evangelical church. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. And we'll come back in a little bit to ask some questions. But I wanted to turn it over now to Undivided and Troy Jackson to give us the perspective from Undivided.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rich. Thanks, Gabe, and thank you, Alexandra and Sylvia, for your work on this. I'm with Undivided, and we are a ministry that is all about cultivating spaces of belonging that activate people to embody agency when it comes to race and ethnicity. And our focus is really trying to get the church to embody racial healing, solidarity, and justice. That's what we're about. And you can pull the slide. I just want to share a few reflections from Undivided's perspective on research. One is we find it instructive that that a number of those interviewed that were part of this study are longing for more guidance on politics and public life from the pulpit. And there's been something that's been internalized, I think, by a lot of evangelical pastors that we are to avoid when it comes to politics. And what I heard in this was there's a longing, at least in the Latino evangelical context, for guidance. Now, I also noticed they don't want partisan guidance. They want guidance rooted in faith and a love for people and humanity. So I think there's something instructive there. I think not only for the congregations that are part of NaLEC, but for our partners in Undivided and perhaps even the broader church in the United States, that avoiding is not a good strategy, given the challenges we're facing right now. Dr. Salguero was just mentioning the disenchantment of young people when it comes to the church in the Latino space. I was at a gathering this week, and trust me, that is not unique to the Hispanic community. It is across the board, a disenchantment with the church writ large, with evangelicalism, and the lack of connection and empathy and commitment to justice that a lot of millennials and particularly Gen Z are looking for. So I think there's some commonality there. There was a piece of the research that I don't know if it showed up as much in the slides, but that basically mentioned that the Hispanic evangelical, Latino evangelical church feels disregarded by the broader evangelical community and the broader Christian community. And in Undivided, I think that's something we really want to take seriously. How can we be in solidarity with NaLEC? How can we be in solidarity with the 27 people who are part of this research, in deep solidarity? This past month, I've found myself getting a little more involved in the community of Springfield, Ohio. I live about just over an hour and a half from Springfield. And if you know about our public dialogue right now, Springfield has found itself right in the crosshairs as 15 to 20,000 Haitian migrants now live in Springfield, and they've been subject to attacks and a lot of vitriol over the past several weeks. And I've seen a couple things. I've seen some respond with amazing generosity and prayer and love. But I've seen the vast majority of the response has been either disinterest or retreat. And as I've talked to some Haitian leaders or been on panels with and in conversation with them, they are so grateful for those that are standing with them. And I have to feel like there's also an anguish for so many being so silent during this period. And that desire to be in solidarity, whether it's with Haitian migrants a few hours from us in Springfield, Ohio, or with other congregations in Orlando, Florida, or across the country that are part of NaLEC, is a big reason why partnerships are so critical for Undivided. When we look at where the growth is in our population, where the cutting edge of the church is, and we feel a special call to the church in Undivided, we know we have to be in deep transformative partnerships with Gabe and Jeanette at the gathering, and with NaLEC and with other organizations. It is great to be on this call. I will say I'll put one plug in, because on Sunday at Undivided, we do something called the Gathering. Now, we did not, I promise, steal this name from Jeanette and Gabe's church, but they're going to be our guests this Sunday. And we just have an hour worship experience. We really tailor this for people who love Jesus and are longing for justice in their lives. And if you're wanting to hear more from Gabe, and trust me, you want to hear from Gabe's wife, Jeanette, as well. We'd love for you to join us on Sunday evening. But with that, I'll turn it back to you, Rich, as we continue our conversation.
Thank you, Troy. And we will share out more information about that Sunday call after this call. So now I want to turn it over to our guests, to Suma Arias and Walter Kim, they just saw the findings this week, and what we're asking them to do is to react to the findings and maybe answer a couple of questions. And what opportunity do you see for your organization? And then who needs to hear more about this? Like, who in your network or outside of your network needs to hear more about these results? I'm first going to turn over to Suma and then over to Walter. Go ahead, Suma.
Great. Thank you, Rich. And thanks, everyone. Again, Sulma Arias here. I am the Executive Director of People's Action. So we come at this, and, there's like so much curiosity, and thank you to everyone who put together this powerful research. I work and I represent 41 grassroots organizations working on the ground with community members in 30 states. And again, huge gratitude for this space and for sharing the powerful information. So I see all kinds of connections, but that is also because I grew up as an evangelical conservative community. And I would say that half of my life and half of my work has been in doing the work of building church and building community. And in those two, as a community organizer and someone in the church, is how I've spent most of my life. So what I've heard here today really deeply resonates with me personally. And 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago now, I became the executive director of an organization that is a social justice progressive organization, no affiliation to faith. However, an organization that has transformed people like me by bringing people together and by bringing together what we call self-interest, connection, and building community. And as part of that, 2 years ago, we also launched what we call an organizing revival. And that came as a result of two things. We believe that we're in a moment where that connection is needed more than ever, where one of the basic powers of humanity that we as human beings, organizations, institutions are in decay is the ability to be able to connect to each other and to bring people together to experience the collective power that we have when we come together. And I come from the orientation that whether you've studied liberation theology and come from that, or just the basics of organizing and understand that bringing people together is powerful and is one of the gifts that we have as organizers. And I would say that in the progressive secular sector of organizing and power building, which is what we do, we've been reckoning for a while with that ability, the ability to effectively connect to one another, which is, again, the essence and what we call our superpower or gift in order to be an effective organizer. And so I see all kinds of connections, and what we are trying to do through different methods, one of them being deep canvas, is that we are bringing back that discipline, that rigor, that organizers who do this because there's got to be humility, there's got to be deep love for people, and wanting to bring people together to solve the injustices that we are experiencing as communities. In order to do that, we have to force ourselves or build back that discipline and rigor of connecting to people that are unlike us. And I would say where the similarities I see in this conversation is that both, and I've had this conversation with some of you individually and with institutions, I think the similarities that I see both in the church and in community organizing is that we're both seeing a decay of what we call base building. And both I've done base building and evangelizing in the church, and I do base building in the community now. And I think we can both say that the ability to be in community and make meaning for people about the world and the things that are happening, but more than anything, just connect, is not as easy for people. I've been back to this neighborhood in Kansas where I've lived most of my life, where I built churches, when I've been in community, and I've been here for almost 2 years. I have seen no community organizer come to my door and connect with me, nor have I seen any of the 8 churches within a 2-mile radius come to my door and invite me to something. And so in organizing and what we're trying to do, but I think all of us is like, how do we build back that rigor and that love for community? Because the most powerful thing we have in this moment is to build that ability to connect to each other. And I'm going to say from, the organizing perspective, I think what I see here, the potential and the possibility is to be in community with all of you, to understand, how do we talk to each other, and how do we actually use both the training and the methodology of organizing, but then that deeper spirituality that I learned the best organizing I know in the church, right? And the things that we do in order to both have a similar or an aligned analysis of what the crisis in the world is at this moment, and how can we go about bringing people together. So that is, I see incredible opportunity here for what we can learn from each other. So I'm approaching this presentation today with a lot of curiosity and a lot of excitement, because just the fact that it's happening and that we're here together moves us forward. So thank you all for this presentation.
Thank you, Sulma. And Walter, same questions.
Yes. Thank you, Rich. And thank you for the presenters for what has been a really insightful and stimulating presentation. And of course, the broader work has been so incredibly important. As president of the National Association of Evangelicals, it is both the challenge to provide leadership in a moment where it seems like the church in America and the role of the church in America is at an important inflection point. So the NAE represents 40 different denominations, thousands of churches, but there's also Christian ministries, organizations, networks, humanitarian aid organizations, ministries that are represented. And it's been a real privilege to collaborate with Dr. Salguero over the years, NaLEC as a central and important member of the NAE, and in UNDIVIDED as well in the work of racial justice. So thank you for the invitation to participate in this and provide some reflection. When it comes to thinking about what opportunities exist, who needs to hear, in some ways, it's a very simple question to answer. Lots of opportunities exist, and everyone needs to hear about it. But let me tease that out a bit. One of the things that I really appreciated was the process that was pursued to move this research from the elite academic realm to the actual setting of lived experience and developing, as Gabe so eloquently put, proximity to the community. And there's a lesson to be learned about process when research is conducted in this way, engaging not only people who are formally trained in academic settings, but are rooted in academic settings, but to engage with people who are actually on the ground in their lived experience. And I think that's a very powerful lesson that we, in the broader religious community, evangelical community, but also in our society, have something very important to learn from the Latino community who has pursued research in this way. And that is, it's often easy to reduce people to a statistic or a poll or a finding when people are much more complex and the context of life needs to be engaged more richly. So the process, I think, has been immensely informative and important lesson about what it is that's required of us in engagement. Secondly, the perspective. This is going to alliterate. I can't help myself. I'm an evangelical. I just think in alliterations. So it's process, but also perspective. And this comes back to the complexity of communities. My own experience as an Asian American, it's easy and tempting to categorize groups. Latino, to categorize that as a group. Asian American, to categorize that as a group. But even within that categorization, there are a myriad of countries and nationalities, immigration stories that are represented. And those are powerful in the diversity. And so the perspective that's drawn is one that reinforces this complexity and the need to understand that more deeply. I was struck by how, when asked for what's the role of engagement, being a voice for the voiceless or being a voice for the concerns of the community, that there was something of a split on that. That already speaks to the perspective of diversity. But I would suspect, and I would love to have further research on this, and I'm so glad to hear that this is just preliminary, the beginning of what I hope to be many other studies to learn from. And that is, while the economy and immigration are shared concerns, I suspect that there are not shared solutions within such a diverse community as the Latino community. So even what the tip of the iceberg might represent as a shared concern, when you go underneath the water to the bulk of the iceberg, they're not shared solutions. And so I appreciate the process, but I also appreciate this complexified perspective that's being given. Thirdly, Suma has already alluded to this, the potential that exists. So this is not only an opportunity from my perspective at the National Association of Evangelicals to learn from the Latino community, but to learn with, because increasingly evangelicalism is at this inflection point, and the Latino community is central to this. And there's a tension that exists here. There are distinct concerns within the Latino community that needs to be respected, but there are integrated concerns now as evangelicalism itself is being transformed by the engagements and the participation of this community. And that potential for collaboration contains within it some tensions of how do we respect distinct issues of community while incorporating in a new vision of community the plurality of concerns. Lots of potentials in there, but to throw in another P, some pitfalls as well and challenges. The last thing I would conclude with, and this speaks to something that Troy has brought up, that we need to be purposeful, that these things will not happen just by chance, that the engagements require purposeful engagements, whether it's Troy at Undivided purposefully inviting the Salgueros to participate in their program, or purposeful understanding of what's happening in Springfield. All this work is a work that requires purposefulness. And I think the very fact that we're in this conversation speaks to a desire for us to be intentional, to be purposeful in our engagements.
Thank you, Suma. Thank you, Walter, so much for participating. I have I'm gonna ask a couple of questions. We have some time, and just have a quick conversation. I wanted to get back to you, Gabe, and something that you said, and something that Walter noted, the importance of that actual Latino evangelicals led this, and you mentioned for us, by us, and I'm just wondering if you could say more about what that means to you, and your congregants that were part of this.
Look, I think that it's in part responding to the invisibility reality, that one of the things that many of the people on the ground said is we feel ignored or we feel invisible. And so when you have researchers like Alejandra and the co-researchers that I've mentioned, Gia, Manny, Jennifer, they're all from the community that speak the language. These are bilingual co-researchers that live, in all different parts of Central Florida from different Latino evangelical churches. I think that gives a sense of empowerment, that this is not just kind of a petri dish understanding of the Latina evangelical reality. Voice matters. Texture matters. And you'll notice that sometimes there are assumptions about the way Latina and Latino evangelicals think about civic participation, and it's not till you hear directly la voz, the voice of these women and these men, that you get the kind of texture. Walter talked about an inflection point. The inflection point of diversity, I think, focuses us to re-examine how we engage. Right? When there's a shift, a demographic shift, when there's a generational shift, and Latinas and Latinos trend younger, there needs to be a kind of empathetic listening. I think that's what the kind of PAR research does. But it's not just empathetic listening, Alejandra would say. It's also empowering. It's, hey, your voice coming to the floor. Nobody's defining you. Nobody's saying, this is what Latino and Latina evangelicals think. Esta es la voz de ellos y de ellas. And I think that's important because for a lot of times it's been filtered through the lens of other people's experiences that, good, bad, or indifferent, don't have a deep understanding of the contextualities and realities de nuestra comunidad, of our communities.
Thank you, Gabe. Sulma, I wanted to ask you, one thing that I found really surprising as an organizer, and you've been organizing for more than 20 years, is that I know I've been using language that people on the ground, in this case, Latino evangelicals, just don't understand. And there's a real disconnect between, so in this case, what I'm talking about is Christian nationalism. It's a term that's just not understood in this study that we found in this study. And I'm just wondering, like, how you would imagine that we address that issue, that there's organizers talking one way, where the people they're trying to organize don't even understand the language that they're using.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely an issue, and the way that I mean, I can see some of the potential coming out of this is like even a training on, how do organizers get trained on how to talk to people in our communities, Christian communities. We do this like deep canvas methodology that we use, and we have developed very specific scripts and language for how to talk to people in rural communities. And it's very targeted the way that and I think organizers need more of that. So one of the potentials I see here is like, I think a lot of the challenge in the way that we've talked about organizing, and the way that the progressive, the Democrats, and people talk about democracy and all of the language that we use that we think makes sense to people. None of it makes sense to the people that organizers are working or work on a day-to-day with. But there's no, I mean, at least in the world that I operate, I haven't seen a training targeting organizers and how do organizers talk to communities so that we can make the connection. Because at the end of the day, I think as organizers, that is our job, right? How do we make meaning? How do we make connections for people? The things that sometimes are not so easy to understand and make meaning of, but are crucial for us to connect the dots and help people understand.
Thank you, Sunma. So we're going to close in a second. And Gabe, I want to give you the last word. I just want to make a couple of announcements. But first of all, I just want to thank again Sulma, Walter, Troy, Gabe, Alexandra, Sylvia, and all of the co-researchers that were involved in this incredible research. Thank you again for your time and dedication to this. So if we could put up the slides. So we have the report. We're going to share it out with you all, but you can also take your phone and take a picture of this QR code, and you will get a copy of the report. And of course, we're going to share out this this webinar with you after the call, and we're going to share out all of the slides and all of the reports so that you can use them. When we're asking, and one action item that we're asking you all to do is for you to share this report with 5 people and share what you learned today with 5 people, and read over the results and what did you find surprising, and share anything that you found surprising or that affirms something that you already know, and share that with 5 other people. So please do that, and then we'll be following up soon with all of you regarding this report. So Gabe, I want to, this is your congregation, that led this. This is your people on the ground in Florida, and I just want you to, if any thoughts to close us off.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I want to just express my sincerest thanks to Richard Morales for shepherding this in such a gracious way. You've already mentioned all our colleagues, so I echo that. Here's what I would say. The word inflection point has been referred to by both Sulma and Walter and others. The question is how we're going to Sherpa that. And I think one of the temptations is to prescribe how people think or assume. And oftentimes assumptions are the lowest form of knowledge. Rather than getting to know and sitting with and listening to the stories, this research was actually getting to know and hearing directly, because often our biography is formative. And so you'll see in the research that and I hope people do visit the webpage, quotes from the people who participated and why they came to this, because why is as important as what. Why you came to that conclusion, why do you sit in that space, I think is important. And I think if we're able to engage our democracy as Latino and Latina evangelicals from an informed space with our own voices and help shape the topography of the future of this country, I think there can be much health for it. Conversely, if our community continues to be defined or colonized in ways that tell us how to think and what to think, while not valuing how God made us and the stories in which God placed us. I think it will impoverish us. And so I'm thankful for Undivided and that collaboration. And I'm thankful for Brandeis for that collaboration. The last thing I think is partnership is the way to go. The University of Virginia scholar, James Davison Hunter, said that the actor of the 21st century is the network. Synergy is the way to go. And so whether you have people like Sulma or people like the NAE or people like Undivided or Brandeis or NaLEC, and the list goes on, we can only be stronger together when we seek to understand one another and listen to one another. And so I think that with credits to James Davison Hunter, philosophy of the network, I think that's the way to go. And dear listener, it's time to fund and invest in indigenous organizations that are close to the ground. It is time to fund and invest in indigenous organizations that are close to the ground. Because if we don't, the narrative will be distorted and our democracy will be impoverished. Sobre todo, mis oraciones de bendiciones, and since I'm in Florida, my prayers for the great state of Florida and the Carolinas and Georgias as they seek to restore all that has been broken. Muchas gracias, Richard.
Well, everybody have a great weekend, and look out for the report and follow up. And thank you for joining us.